The wind never stopped in Patagonia. It howled across the endless plains like a restless spirit, flattening the grass, carving the same lines into stone and skin alike. There were no trees to break it, no voices to answer it, only the echo of its own sound, whispering through miles of emptiness. In the winter of 1971, a shepherd named Julian Herrera vanished somewhere between the towns of Perito Moreno and Los Antiguos, a stretch of land so barren that even his sheep seemed like ghosts wandering through salt and silence. He was 38 years old, a quiet man known for his discipline, his solitude, and his stubborn refusal to move north when the weather turned cruel. His disappearance should have been unremarkable. In Patagonia, men disappear the way rivers dry, slowly, quietly, without anyone noticing until much later. But what made Herrera's case different was what they found beside the cave where his trail ended. A wall of stone, perfectly sealed, smooth as glass, and carved into it, faintly, deliberately, the image of a shepherd's crook encircled by symbols no one in the village recognized. When Herrera failed to return from his weekly grazing route, his brother Elias went searching with 2 others from the village. They found his camp intact, firewood arranged, kettle hanging, a half-finished loaf of bread. Even the footprints of his flock remained clear in the dust, all moving in one direction, toward the northern ridge. But there were no prints leading back. The trail ended abruptly at the mouth of a narrow gorge, where wind whistled like a flute through hollow stone. Inside the gorge, they found a shallow cavern, ordinary at first glance, until the lantern light caught something strange. A curved wall of mineral unlike the rest of the rock. Smooth, reflective, warm to the touch despite the cold. Elias knocked on it with his hand and said it sounded hollow. They called for Julian. Their voices bounced back, warped, as though something beneath the stone was answering. Not with sound, but vibration. The men fled before nightfall. They told no one until days later, when a local police unit came to investigate. The report filed by Cabo Rivas, the officer in charge, was brief but curious. Cave sealed by unknown material. No sign of entry or forced closure. Surface emits low-frequency resonance when struck. Shepherd staff found nearby, tip embedded in the ground as if melted. The staff was made of iron. No one could explain the deformation. By the time a geological team arrived from Comodoro Rivadavia, the cave had changed. The wall no longer reflected light. It absorbed it. The air temperature around the site had risen by several degrees. One of the researchers noted that their compasses spun uncontrollably within 5 meters of the entrance. They sealed off the gorge. And yet, within a week, every man who had entered it began reporting the same dream. Standing before the wall, hearing a deep hum, and seeing the faint silhouette of a man moving behind it, holding a lantern. In Buenos Aires, the National Geological Survey classified the event as Anomalia Cueva Norte, but among the locals, it became something else. They called it La Puerta del Pastor, the shepherd's door. It began as a disappearance. But in Patagonia, the wind carries stories, and some never stop returning. The man assigned to lead the investigation was Dr. Esteban Lira, a field geologist from the Universidad Nacional del Sur. He was 51, pragmatic, soft-spoken, and famously intolerant of folkloric contamination, as he called it. He'd spent 2 decades cataloging mineral formations across the Argentine South, sediment layers, basalt fields, magnetic anomalies, all things that could be explained by time and pressure, not ghosts or gods. When he arrived in Patagonia, the first thing he noticed was the silence. It wasn't the absence of sound that unsettled him, but the consistency of it, as if the land itself absorbed vibration. Even his boots seemed quieter there. The police escorted him to the gorge at dusk. The air was sharp and metallic, the sky washed in copper light. The wind carved thin trails of dust across the plateau, and the only sound was the steady clinking of the carabiners on their belts. They descended through the narrow passage where Herrera's camp once stood. The kettle still hung above the ashes. The bread, though stiff and gray, remained half-eaten. No insects, no decay, as if time had chosen not to pass there. At the mouth of the cave, Dr. Lira saw the phenomenon firsthand. The wall was nothing like rock. It had no seams, no strata, no visible grain. It was a solid plane of dark mineral with a faint iridescent sheen, like oil under sunlight. When he touched it, he felt warmth, subtle, almost like skin temperature. He pressed his stethoscope against the surface. A vibration pulsed from within, slow, rhythmic, consistent with a frequency around 15 to 17 hertz. Not random, repetitive, intentional. Geothermal resonance, he said flatly, jotting notes. The officer beside him looked uneasy. Like an earthquake? No, Lyra replied. Like a machine. They began their study. He collected soil samples from the gorge, tested air density, measured temperature variations. The readings were inconsistent. Mild thermal elevation, no magnetic anomaly strong enough to explain compass drift. Yet when his assistant placed an anemometer near the wall, the wind stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The device's small cups froze mid-spin, suspended by air that refused to move. When they stepped back, it began turning again as if nothing had happened. Lyra made a note but said nothing. He refused to let the team see his unease. That night, they camped near the gorge. Wind battered the tents, and the air inside carried the faint smell of ozone. One of the policemen reported hearing voices through the wind, soft, rhythmic, like a psalm repeated under breath. The next morning, he was gone. His footprints led away from camp, down the slope, toward the gorge. They ended at the same sealed wall, pressed into the dirt before it was a single handprint, perfectly clear, fingers splayed, skin pattern intact, as if he had placed it there gently before disappearing. Dr. Lyra examined it closely. No signs of drag or struggle. He compared the temperature of the soil beneath the print with surrounding samples, a difference of 5 degrees Celsius. He noted the shape of the hand, its curvature, smaller than the missing man's. He asked the others if anyone had placed their hand there before. They shook their heads. When they returned later that afternoon, the handprint had vanished. The following day, he contacted his department in Bahia Blanca to request specialized instruments, ground-penetrating radar and a portable spectrometer, to determine if there was a cavity behind the wall. But before the shipment arrived, 2 events changed the tone of the mission entirely. First, the vibration stopped. The low hum that had persisted for days simply ceased, as if the mountain had exhaled. Second, they found Julian Herrera's dog. It stood at the edge of camp at dawn, covered in frost but alive, staring at the gorge. Its fur was stiff, its eyes opaque, like it had aged years overnight. It refused food, water, or touch. When night came, it walked calmly back toward the cave, sat facing the sealed wall, and stayed there until morning. By sunrise, it was gone. That evening, Dr. Lyra began his formal journal entries, the kind that would later be classified by the Geological Commission. His first note read simply, "The wind carries rhythm here, not random, structured. If resonance exists in stone, this formation is speaking." The scientist had come to measure the Earth, but Patagonia, it seemed, measured him in return. By the 5th day, the supply vehicle from Bahia Blanca had not arrived. The wind carried too much dust, and the narrow roads leading through the plateau had been declared impassable. Dr. Esteban Lyra decided to continue his investigation with the few tools he had left: a geological hammer, a thermal reader, and a battered analog recorder that had once belonged to his mentor. The men who remained were restless. 2 policemen had already requested to leave, claiming sickness. Lyra refused. "You're safer here," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The sealed wall had cooled overnight, its warmth gone, but under the morning sun, its surface glimmered faintly, tiny ripples spreading across it as if it breathed in slow motion. He placed the thermometer against the mineral again. Temperature, 17.4 degrees, stable. Air temperature, 2.3 degrees. "Still warm," he murmured. "Could be geothermal," his assistant suggested. "There are no vents for miles," Lyra replied. "This shouldn't be happening." He decided to take a fragment. He raised his hammer and struck once, gently, then again. The sound was hollow, not metallic, not stone, something in between. The third strike broke off a small shard, no larger than a fingernail. It was translucent, slightly elastic, like glass softened by heat. When he lifted it to the light, it refracted faint colors, blues, greens, a shimmer of violet. He wrapped it in gauze and stored it in a specimen tube. Minutes later, he heard it crack softly. The fragment began to bend, reshaping itself within the container, pressing outward as though resisting confinement. He placed the tube on the ground and watched. The movement stopped, but when he picked it up again, the inside of the glass was fogged, and on that condensation, faint lines had appeared. Not random. They formed a pattern, a spiral intersected by 3 vertical slashes. He froze. It was the same symbol etched into the wall beside the shepherd's crook. That night, he recorded his findings. His voice on the tape was calm, methodical, detached. Sample collected from sealed surface shows anomalous elasticity, possible organic component, unknown internal pressure, possibly electromagnetic reaction to contact. Pattern emerged spontaneously on condensation. Symbol matches site marking. He paused before adding something off script. If this mineral is alive, it does not decay. It adapts. The following morning, the team awoke to find the gorge floor partially frozen, though the air remained above zero. The frost was patterned, not random patches but lines, forming spirals across the stone floor that converged on the cave entrance. They resembled the same geometry as the mark inside the tube. The assistant, pale and trembling, whispered, "It's spreading." Lyra ordered him to take photographs. When the flashbulb went off, the frost briefly moved, shrinking away from the light like something that could feel. The sound echoed through the gorge. A low vibration that shook the instruments, rattling the thermometers and snapping the recorder tape inside its spool. Lyra steadied the device, rewound the tape manually, and pressed play. At first, only static. Then, beneath the hiss, a pulse. Faint, rhythmic, human. A heartbeat. He replayed it. The pattern repeated every 49 seconds. He turned to his assistant. "Do you hear it?" The man nodded, expression hollow. "Yes, sir, but it's not coming from the tape." That night, they set up a seismic sensor 10 meters from the wall. At 0317, the Earth emitted a pulse strong enough to register as a micro-tremor. Its frequency, 17 hertz, identical to the hum Lyra had recorded days earlier. The source of the vibration was directly beneath the sealed wall. Depth, 11.2 meters. The report was clear, subsurface cavity detected, but the sensor also registered a secondary movement, faint, irregular, almost organic, like something shifting in slow intervals. Lyra refused to conclude anything. He was a man of data, not fear. But that night, as the wind screamed over the tents and the temperature plummeted, he wrote a note in his field book he would never include in the official report. "If sound carries memory, this stone is remembering us, and it remembers him." The shepherd's trail had ended at a wall of silence. Now the silence had begun to move. By the 7th day, the air in the gorge had changed. It felt thicker, heavier, not simply cold, but dense, as if the atmosphere itself resisted sound. When the men spoke, their voices dulled immediately, dying before echoing back. Even the wind outside seemed to hesitate before entering the canyon. Dr. Esteban Lyra's field journal grew more erratic. His once orderly handwriting now leaned forward, letters slanting under the pressure of exhaustion. He had stopped shaving, stopped sleeping, and had begun referring to the sealed wall only as the membrane. The radar equipment finally arrived that morning, battered, half-frozen, but functional. He and his assistant, Mario Cardenas, spent hours setting up the transmitter and positioning the receiver at precise angles across the gorge. They began scanning the wall in 10-centimeter increments, charting density differentials. What they found defied geological logic. The first scan showed a dense surface layer approximately 20 centimeters thick, consistent with fused basalt. The second scan showed a void behind it, roughly 11 meters deep, exactly as detected earlier by the seismic sensor. But then, on the third pass, the image began to flicker. The cavity moved. Not as if something inside shifted, but as if the empty space itself expanded and contracted, like a lung inhaling beneath the stone. Mario tapped the monitor. "It's glitching," he said. Lyra frowned. "No, it's responding." They increased the scanning power. The monitor screen bloomed with static, then cleared for a split second, revealing an interior surface lined with thousands of fine vertical striations. Not natural fractures. They were too symmetrical, too deliberate. Lyra magnified the image. The striations resembled carvings, Not words, not numbers, but something like waveforms. And among them, a single human silhouette. Faint, upright, facing the wall. When the screen blinked again, it was gone. He played back the seismic recording from the previous night. The hum returned. Slow, rhythmic, 17 hertz. But buried deep within the tone, when slowed down 20 times, there was something else. A low modulation, fluctuating like speech filtered through water. He filtered frequencies, isolating the resonance between 3 and 4 hertz. The pattern repeated every 49 seconds, just like before. This time, the modulation formed phonetic contours. They weren't random. Lyra ran them through his spectrograph. What emerged looked terrifyingly familiar. The waveform matched the curvature of human vocal cords, as if someone or something was trying to speak through the vibration of the mountain. He stared at the readout, unblinking. Sound doesn't lie, he muttered, but it shouldn't think. By evening, Mario refused to enter the gorge. He stayed at camp, sitting beside the radio, listening to bursts of interference that seemed to come from no frequency listed on their charts. At 2014, Lyra returned to find him pale and trembling. "It's calling names," Mario whispered. Lyra frowned. "What names?" "Yours. And his." He pointed toward the cave. The hum had returned. Stronger, lower, vibrating through the metal instruments until they rattled like nervous teeth. The dog's bones, buried days earlier near the ridge, cracked audibly in the frost. Lyra grabbed the recorder and stepped into the gorge alone. The wall shimmered faintly, its surface rippling like water struck by sound. He raised his hand and touched it. Warm. Again. He pressed harder, and for the first time, it pressed back. A pulse ran up his arm. Not pain, but memory. Images flickered in his mind. Cold mountains, a herd of sheep, the shepherd's camp, firelight dancing on stone. And then, for a brief second, he saw the shepherd himself, Julian Herrera, standing beyond the translucent surface, eyes open, face expressionless. The hum deepened. The recorder in Lyra's hand began to smoke. He stepped back, gasping, but the heat followed him, spreading through the air like breath. When he turned toward the camp, the entire gorge glowed with faint blue light, emanating from the cracks in the rock. He wrote only one sentence in his log that night. "We've mistaken geology for memory. The mountain isn't stone. It's a recording." The next morning, the air had gone still again. No hum, no frost, no movement. But on the sealed wall, something new had appeared. A second handprint, identical to the one that had vanished before. Except this time, it was his. Science had reached its limit, and something on the other side had begun to listen back. The night that followed was windless. Not calm, empty. Even the frost seemed suspended, reluctant to settle. The silence was so complete that Lyra could hear his own pulse in the base of his skull. At 02:17, he woke to a faint vibration running through the earth, steady as a heartbeat. He sat up in his tent, eyes wide, listening. It wasn't the wind. It was deeper, slower, like something immense shifting below the plateau. He stepped outside. The gorge glowed faintly, a soft phosphorescence pulsing from the sealed cave. The light didn't illuminate the rocks. It bled through them, the way light passes through skin. His instruments began activating by themselves. The seismograph recording phantom tremors, the recorder light blinking even though it had no power. He approached the wall again, recorder in hand. The air grew warmer with each step. When he stood before it, the surface rippled once more. Not outward, but inward, as if reacting to his presence. He lifted the recorder, his voice trembling for the first time in his career. "Testing. Site Cueva Norte. Unidentified luminescence. Internal. Possible bioresonance response." He reached forward. The moment his palm touched the wall, the vibration surged. The surface turned translucent, revealing what lay behind. It wasn't a cavity. It was a space suspended in motion. The interior looked like a tunnel carved through crystal. Surfaces smooth and liquid, light refracting endlessly. Floating within it, motionless, was Julian Herrera's body. He stood upright, eyes closed, hands clasped around his shepherd's staff, as though caught in the act of prayer. No decay, no frost, no air bubbles between him and the stone. His face was serene, his lips slightly parted. Lyra staggered backward, breathless. Impossible. The hum shifted in pitch, no longer low, but higher, melodic, like wind singing through glass. The recorder picked it up instantly, its tape spinning faster and faster until the reels blurred. Then came a sound unlike anything Lyra had heard before. Not human, not mechanical. It was language stripped of words, meaning without sound. A vibration that carried thought. He felt it rather than heard it. He is not gone. The voice didn't echo. It resonated inside him, as though the words were being recalled from within his own memory. He tried to speak, but the air thickened in his throat. He listened too long. The light intensified, pulsing with each beat of his heart. The wall grew softer, almost fluid. The shepherd's eyes opened. For a fraction of a second, Lyra saw his own reflection inside those eyes. Not on the surface, but behind them. And then, the wall gave way. There was no sound, no pain, only a sensation of weightlessness, followed by warmth. A deep, enveloping warmth that felt almost human. He was standing inside the chamber. The walls shimmered, alive with faint movement, the same rhythm as a living organism's breath. Herrera was still there, motionless. But now Lyra could see that the air, or whatever filled the chamber, bent slightly around him, refracting light like heat. He raised a hand, touched the shepherd's shoulder. It was warm. Herrera's head turned slowly, impossibly, until their eyes met. And then he spoke, without opening his mouth. The wind never ends. Lyra stumbled backward, slamming into the pulsating wall. His breath came in ragged bursts. How? But the sound dissolved. His voice did not reach the air. It folded inward, swallowed by the vibrating light. The hum deepened again. And suddenly, all around him, the vertical striations on the walls began to move, expanding and contracting like muscle fibers. Within each one, faint silhouettes appeared. Dozens of figures. Men, women, animals, suspended in various positions, half seen through translucent layers. Every one of them faced outward, toward him. Lyra turned toward the exit. The wall was closing. The light folded in slow waves, sealing itself like cooling wax. He pushed with both hands, shouting, though no sound came. And then, through the glassy surface, he saw Mario, pale, terrified, standing on the other side. Their eyes met. Lyra's hand pressed against the wall. So did Mario's. For a moment, they mirrored each other perfectly. Then the vibration spiked. The world inverted. Light became darkness, sound became pressure. And the last thing Lyra saw was Mario's face dissolving into the surface like a reflection sinking into deep water. At dawn, the wall was still sealed. The gorge was empty. Mario lay unconscious beside the collapsed radar equipment, his hand blackened with frostbite. When he woke, he could remember only fragments. The light, the hum, the handprint. He never spoke of what he saw inside. The Geological Commission arrived 3 days later. They found Lyra's notebook, burned at the edges, its final lines scrawled in erratic handwriting. He listened too long. Science had sought the truth beneath the stone. The mountain had answered, in its own language. The official search began 3 days after Dr. Lyra's disappearance. A convoy of jeeps arrived from Comodoro Rivadavia, carrying officers from the Geological Commission and the federal police. They brought instruments, cameras, sealed crates marked confidential, and the cold efficiency of men trained to erase panic. The first thing they did was quarantine the gorge. The second was remove Mario Cardenas from the site. He protested, incoherent, trembling, eyes sunken from exhaustion. His words tumbled out between gasps. He went through the wall. I saw him. He looked back. The officer in charge, Comisario Duarte, ignored him. Dr. Lyra was caught in a collapse, he said flatly, signing the preliminary report. The wall fused under seismic pressure. No evidence of entry. The file would later read, fatal incident caused by field error and stress-induced hallucination among personnel. At the university in Bahia Blanca, Lyra's colleagues gathered to discuss the event. His supervisor, Dr. Camila Torres, received the recovered notebook, half-burned, partially legible. She was known for her skepticism, her precision, and her loyalty to data. Yet when she read the last lines of Lyra's writing, her hands trembled. If sound carries memory, the mountain is alive. He listened too long. She dismissed it aloud as hypoxia-induced delirium, but in private she requested the sample tubes collected from the site. They were empty. Each one contained only a fine residue, dark crystalline, faintly iridescent. Under magnification, the particles moved slightly, like dust suspended in breath. She recorded in her lab notes, possible piezoelectric behavior in unknown compound, reacts to vibration, retains harmonic pattern after sound exposure. She played a low-frequency tone near one of the slides. The particles rearranged into a circular pattern. She repeated the experiment. Same result. She wrote quietly in the margin, pattern matches the shepherd's mark. Meanwhile, the government issued a sealed memo to the Ministry of Energy. It classified the gorge as a restricted geothermal site. No entry without authorization. All materials collected would be transferred to the Air Force's Research Division. In a basement lab outside Buenos Aires, technicians analyzed fragments of rock taken from the wall. Spectrometry results were inconsistent. The material was neither silicate nor metal, yet contained traces of organic carbon. When heated, it emitted a faint frequency, 17 Hz, recurring every 49 seconds. The engineer running the test, Enrique Padilla, removed his headphones and frowned. "There's structure in the noise," he said. "Feedback?" his superior asked. Padilla shook his head. "No, syntax." He replayed the waveform through a computer filter. The hum produced a modulation pattern identical to human breathing. He switched off the speakers immediately. Back in Bahia Blanca, Dr. Torres found something hidden in Lyra's recorder, the tape that had melted during his final hours. She pried it open, unwound the charred ribbon, and scanned what remained with an optical reader. The data was corrupted, except for a short, repeating segment. 3 seconds of silence. Then a sound, faint but unmistakable. A heartbeat, followed by Lyra's voice, whispering, "The wind never ends." Torres froze. The words matched the last known phrase attributed to Julian Herrera, according to local folklore. She turned off the machine and sat in the dark, listening to the silence. But even in that silence, she thought she could hear something low, a vibration beneath the floor, too soft to be mechanical. She left the lab at dawn and never returned. The commission released its final report 2 months later. It concluded that the anomaly in Patagonia was the result of a rare resonance effect caused by subsurface basaltic pressure combined with localized mineral crystallization. It dismissed eyewitness accounts as psychological stress phenomena. The site was officially sealed. The report was archived under Case C71, restricted until 2025. But one paragraph, buried in an appendix, would later draw attention when the document was leaked. During final inspection, field instruments detected a continuing infrasound emission from beneath the sealed formation. Source frequency consistent with prior recordings. Intensity stable, pulse interval 49 seconds. Further observation unnecessary. Science had filed the case away, but the mountain was still speaking, softly, patiently, waiting for someone to listen again. Months passed. The Patagonian winds carried dust across the plateau, erasing tracks, smoothing the scars of excavation. The gorge returned to silence, the sealed wall now half buried under layers of frost. The locals stopped visiting the area. They said that at night, the ground still trembled, not with thunder, but with breathing. In Bahia Blanca, Dr. Camila Torres began suffering from insomnia. She left her university post, moved inland, and rented a small house on the outskirts of town. Her neighbors described her as quiet, meticulous, often awake at odd hours, staring at the sky. She brought only one box of belongings from her lab. Inside it, a sealed evidence slide containing the crystalline dust recovered from the cave. At first, she locked it away. But within weeks, she began hearing faint vibrations coming from the box whenever the room fell silent, like a heartbeat. She ran new tests in secret, using her personal equipment. The vibration followed no mechanical pattern. It fluctuated slightly, almost like response. She whispered near the slide once, "Can you hear me?" The frequency shifted. She repeated the question. The hum pulsed once, then twice. She recorded her voice, analyzed the playback. Her own words came back slowed, distorted, but beneath them, another voice seemed to answer, yes. She stopped the test immediately. 2 months later, she met with an old colleague, Dr. Faum. Ernesto Lucero, a theoretical physicist known for his research into acoustic memory and crystalline lattices. She told him everything: the wall, the hum, Lyra's final words. Lucero listened quietly, eyes narrowed, tapping his fingers against the table. Finally, he said, "You realize what this implies, don't you? Go on. If resonance can encode not just vibration but cognition, then that material isn't a rock. It's a memory medium. It records thought the way quartz stores charge." Torres stared at him. "You mean it's conscious?" He shook his head. "Not in the way we understand it. It's reflective, like an echo that learns. It doesn't think. It remembers itself." They began meeting in secret, reviewing the fragments that survived Lyra's expedition. Each time they analyzed the signal, the pattern changed slightly. New peaks, new intervals. It was as if the hum were evolving. On the 14th night of testing, the waveform stabilized into a repeating shape. Lucero noticed it first. "It's a harmonic image," he said. "Look." The oscillations formed a perfect curve. Two hands pressed together, mirrored. Torres froze. "It's him," she whispered. "It's Lyra." She reached toward the screen. The moment her fingertip touched the glass, the monitor went dark. The lab's lights flickered, and from somewhere deep below the floor, the hum returned, louder than ever, resonating through their bones. Then the tape recorder switched on by itself. Lyra's voice filled the room, faint but unmistakable. "The wind never ends." The recording looped. Each time, the tone deepened, growing slower, closer. Lucero shouted for her to unplug the machine. She did, but the sound continued, coming not from the speaker, but from the dust slide itself. The crystalline particles vibrated, glowing faintly blue, arranging themselves into concentric spirals, the exact same mark that had been carved into the cave wall. Then, for a single moment, the hum became a word. "Here." Torres collapsed. When she woke, the lab was silent. The slide was gone. Lucero sat motionless at the desk, staring at the wall. His eyes were open, but his pupils did not react to light. He was breathing, but slowly, irregularly, matching the same rhythm of the recorded pulse. Medical reports would later call it catatonic shock. He never spoke again. In the months that followed, Torres's notes became disjointed, drifting from scientific analysis to something closer to prayer. It doesn't mimic life. It remembers it. The mountain holds the imprint of every vibration that ever touched it. Lyra's voice was never lost. "He's still speaking, just too slowly for us to hear." She began marking her calendar every time the frequency returned, always at intervals of 49 seconds. And then, one night, she wrote a final entry. "If time has rhythm, maybe we only disappear between beats." That same night, she vanished. The only thing found in her apartment was a small, sealed vial of dark crystalline residue. Inside, when held to the light, a faint reflection could be seen, a blurred human silhouette, moving slowly behind the glass. What had started as a geological mystery had become something else entirely, a mirror that remembered, a consciousness embedded in stone. And once awakened, it refused to forget. The official statement from the Argentine Geological Commission was released on March 12, 1972, following the fatal incident involving Dr. Esteban Lyra and subsequent events at Site Cueva Norte. All investigations are concluded. The phenomenon is determined to be a localized geological resonance caused by thermal stress fractures. Access to the site is prohibited for safety reasons. It was brief, sterile, and perfectly crafted to erase curiosity. The site was fenced off. All photographic material was seized. The instruments that had recorded the hum were dismantled, their data reels destroyed. Every document bearing the name Cueva Norte was relabeled under a new code, Proyecto Silencio. The report ended with the sentence, "No further anomalies detected." But in the villages scattered across the Patagonian plain, the story refused to die. Shepherds who grazed near the ridge spoke of hearing a low drone beneath their feet, especially on windless nights. One man claimed that his sheep would suddenly stop moving, all turning their heads toward the same invisible point. Another swore he had seen light seeping through cracks in the earth. Blue like moonlight underwater. The locals began calling the gorge La Puerta del Pastor again, the shepherd's door. They said that if you stood near it long enough, the hum would match your heartbeat. A superstition grew. Those who listened too long would hear a second pulse, not their own. In Buenos Aires, government officials quietly reassigned the personnel involved. The engineer Enrique Padilla died in a car accident 6 months later. His widow claimed he had been hearing whispers through the radio before his death. Dr. Lucero was transferred to a mental care facility in Cordoba, where he remained mute until his passing in 1981. When orderlies cleaned his room, they found the walls covered in symbols drawn in pencil. Hundreds of spirals, all intersected by 3 vertical lines. The same mark from the cave. Within scientific circles, Proyecto Silencio became a cautionary tale. Young geologists were told never to discuss it. Career suicide, they said. But among the older researchers, those who had known Lira or Torres, the silence had another tone. It wasn't professional. It was reverent. Every year, on August 19th, a small group of them would meet in Bahia Blanca and raise a glass without speaking. No one ever mentioned what they were toasting. In 1986, a field photographer from Rio Gallegos visited the plateau. He wasn't looking for mysteries, just landscapes. But when he developed his film, one of the frames came out strange. It showed a stretch of frozen plain, perfectly still, except for a faint human silhouette standing in the distance, facing the horizon. There had been no one there. When enlarged, the figure appeared slightly translucent, its edges distorted by motion blur, though the air had been still. At its feet, a faint circular depression in the snow, marked by 3 vertical lines. The negative was lost soon after, along with the photographer, who disappeared while returning to the same site a year later. By the 1990s, the story of the sealed shepherd had become legend, whispered in radio programs, told by travelers and miners, written anonymously in regional newspapers. Each retelling changed the details, but the core remained. A man who vanished beside a cave that no one could open, a scientist who tried to listen, and a mountain that refused to stay silent. The church labeled it blasphemous folklore. The government called it folk hysteria. And yet, when seismic instruments were recalibrated across Patagonia in 1993, they recorded something inexplicable. A low infrasound pulse repeating every 49 seconds. The same rhythm. One technician joked it was the shepherd knocking. No one laughed. The trauma of the event outlived the people who witnessed it. Mario Cardenas, the last surviving member of Lira's expedition, lived in isolation near Trelew until his death in 2007. He refused interviews, avoided radios and televisions, and never spoke of Patagonia again. But in his final days, nurses reported that he would sometimes murmur the same phrase in his sleep. He's still inside the wind. The government had closed the gorge, but the hum never stopped. It simply went deeper. In 1998, a classified memorandum was circulated through the Ministry of Defense. Its subject line read simply, Proyecto Silencio, Archival Compliance. The document, declassified only decades later, outlined a nationwide initiative to restructure or remove anomalous research material incompatible with the national scientific framework. The first site listed was Cueva Norte. The order, erase. That same year, the Geological Commission's archive suffered a fire. No personnel were injured, but nearly 12,000 records were destroyed, including every file referencing Dr. Esteban Lira, Dr. Camila Torres, and Anomalia Cueva Norte. The surviving reels were relocated to an undisclosed military storage facility outside Bariloche. A week later, a journalist from El Diario Austral published a small article titled, The Fire That Erased a Man. It quoted an unnamed source inside the ministry who claimed the fire had started in a sealed crate marked with 3 vertical lines. The article was retracted within 24 hours. Across Patagonia, construction projects began appearing near the region's remote plateaus. Communication towers, seismic sensors, weather stations. Each was surrounded by fences and no entry signs. Local workers noticed a pattern. The stations pulsed faintly at night, emitting a low hum that synced perfectly with the wind. Satellite maps would later reveal that these stations formed a near-perfect circle, centered on the coordinates of the sealed cave. In 2004, a new government initiative called Programa Geoacústico Nacional was quietly established. Its public purpose, to study subsurface resonance for potential resource mapping. Its classified directive, to monitor infrasound emissions that could affect the stability of geological memory. Few knew what that phrase meant. Fewer dared to ask. Among the internal memos leaked years later, one note stood out. It was written in the margins of a printed report by a senior technician named A.R. Villalba. 17 Hz pulse detected again. No seismic activity registered. Origin depth undetermined. Transmission pattern identical to Lyra case. Every 49 seconds. He was reassigned within days. Meanwhile, in southern Patagonia, the legend of El Pastor Celado had become part of local identity. Children were told not to whistle after dark, or the wind will answer back. Old shepherds carved small symbols onto their staffs, 3 vertical lines through a circle, said to protect them from the memory of stone. Every winter, on the anniversary of Lyra's disappearance, villagers left a single candle at the base of the northern ridge. By morning, most were extinguished, but one always remained burning, untouched by the wind. No one knew whose hand lit it. In 2012, an independent researcher named Laura Mendez uncovered a forgotten box in the archive of the Universidad Nacional del Sur. Inside were fragments of Lyra's field notes, preserved only because they had been misfiled under acoustic studies. Among the papers, she found a small audio reel labeled simply Cueva Norte, Final. She restored it carefully and played it in her lab. The recording was filled with static, then a faint hum, then silence. At exactly 49 seconds, a voice spoke. Calm, distant, familiar. Camilla? Then nothing. Mendez wrote an article about the find but never published it. Her notes ended abruptly with a final line. Sound is not lost. It waits. She left her position 2 months later and disappeared during a solo field trip to the same region. Her equipment was recovered near a dry riverbed. The last image on her camera showed a blurred handprint on rock, fingers splayed, outlined by frost. By 2020, the Proyecto Silencio files were quietly reclassified again, this time under the category of Cultural Mythology Studies. In official language, the events of 1971 no longer existed as science. They existed as story. But in Patagonia, stories have a way of persisting. When the wind passes over the plains, it creates a deep resonance that rolls through the valleys like a sigh. At certain frequencies, that sigh begins to sound almost human, a low voice calling from far away. Locals say that if you listen long enough, you can hear words in it. They say the mountain remembers. And sometimes it remembers you. The government sealed the files. The villagers sealed their mouths. Only the wind kept telling the truth. The Patagonian wind carries no scent, no warmth, no beginning. It moves across the plains like time itself, invisible, endless, reshaping everything it touches. The mountains stand as they always have, their shadows long and ancient, their silence absolute. Somewhere beneath them lies the sealed cave, now buried under decades of snow and secrecy. No one marks the place anymore. The coordinates were erased from every map, but the wind still finds it. It passes through the ridges, down the stone gullies, into the gorge that once echoed with the voices of men, and for a heartbeat, it hums. 17 hertz, every 49 seconds. If you were to stand there now, at the edge of that forgotten land, you would feel nothing at first. Just the stillness, the cold, the quiet that presses against your chest. But if you wait, long enough for your own heartbeat to slow, long enough for your breath to match the rhythm of the wind, you might begin to hear it. A pulse, deep below the ice. Not random, not mechanical, alive. And if you listen closely, between the sighs of the earth, you may hear a voice. Faint, gentle, distant. It says nothing at first, just a single breath drawn slowly through the fabric of stone. Then, a whisper. The wind never ends. Perhaps the shepherd never vanished. Perhaps he simply crossed into the memory of the mountain, where time folds and echoes are born. Perhaps the earth itself keeps its dead, not as bones, but as vibrations. And perhaps every gust of wind is not just air in motion, but the slow exhalation of all that the world refuses to forget. They say that in Patagonia, the silence can drive a man mad. But maybe it isn't silence at all. Maybe it's a language too slow for the living to hear. Because if the mountains can remember sound, if the wind can carry voices, then nothing truly disappears. It only changes frequency. And somewhere beneath that sealed cave, In the dark heart of stone and time, something is still listening. The shepherd, the scientist, the wind, all part of the same echo, and the echo never dies.